So I brought Minerva to BCS Rosemont to see if she could still hang with the meta. And trust me, after testing with the homies, I thought I was ready. But let's just say things did not go exactly as planned. This event had 7 rounds and it was a tough field. Minerva had to go against the strongest decks in the metagame right now, which is Vyrgilla and Heartluru. And obviously I had a game plan going into it, but I'm going to showcase my deck list, talk about some of the changes that have happened, and also what happened actually in the event too. And I'll cover some of the key highlights from my matchups too. So let's get right into it. So starting with the right line, it's what you expect, the whole Minerva line exactly as is. And this is the serial number 1 that I just recently got, so it looks gorgeous. And I used the Shiranui top loaders that I got a while back to protect them, of course. Very cool. Into the main deck, we have 4 copies of the Grade 4 Minerva. This was useful to discard fodder as you go up the right line. You're going to soul charge it with cards such as the Grade 2 Vivini. And also if you had a Coco in hand, you can immediately soul charge it like turn 1, turn 2 if needed to. Whenever your opponent's like Grade 3 already, you want to go into this Minerva ASAP. You get the triple drive, we restand with 1 drive, just a phenomenal card overall. I would recommend sticking with the 4 copies so you see it as often as you need to. And if you so happen to see it in your top 5 when you soul charge for Chamomile and Melissa, that's like the best feeling too. So one of the new additions is the Grade 3 version of Minerva. And so I was initially not playing this. I felt like the Grade 4 Minerva was enough. Having that 10k to maybe 15k if you had a Genesis card to shove into soul felt just right, especially if you had 6+ attacks going into that turn. However, it wasn't necessarily just increasing the power of those attacks. I got into situations thanks to testing with Sagran, and he made me realize because he was able to limit my counterblast, and even if you have cards such as like Angelica and Dissection Angel, it wasn't always easy to perform those turns, especially if you don't have them to. So it got me thinking, what is an alternate way to make those turns, even if I had to go back down to 4 attacks, 5 attacks, what would give it more pressure that turn still? And it's really the Persona right. And so with that, with the Grade 4 Minerva, you'll have a total of 20k to the field. And now you don't have to worry about having a Genesis card to shove into soul on top of that. What's really cool is that you can soul blast your right line Minerva. And then if you have the Grade 1 Relium, you can actually grab that during the battle phase, and now for the following turn, you can keep doing Persona Ride, and you can kind of see you can cycle that for another turn. Typically, you need maybe 2 turns if you really want to solidify the finish, and so I felt like the 1 copy was enough, and it wasn't such an important piece that I really needed to see it ASAP, so I felt comfortable having it at 1, and I saw it as more of a supplemental, and also if I saw it early on, I could soul charge it, soul blast it out, and use Relium to grab it that way too. The card that I ended up replacing with was the Ace unit. That just was awkward. I felt like you want Angelica, you want Vivini, you want maybe Biscotti in a rare case to be in the front row. And the Ace unit was kind of awkward. And it also used energy, which conflicted with both Biscotti and also Vivini. And sometimes calling from the deck doesn't always help with Vivini. Vivini has to be called from hand on top of that too, so I felt like the Ace unit would just stay in my hand in most games. And it has no shield, so it felt like I was basically playing a Grade 3 that I was holding on to, so I felt like that was the best switch. So I went up to 4 Angelica in this case. I was trying the Raziel pack, but in my most recent practices, I feel like my matches did not drag that long for Raziel to shine as much, and I really appreciated Angelica, especially if you're going first, where you can soul blast a Chamomile to get you a 4th attack, and if you have a Vivini, you could technically do 5 attacks while your opponent's still at Grade 2, just with the regards doing stuff, right? And it also counter charges before the Vanguard swing. One of the issues with this deck is that on swing with Minerva, that's when Vivini needs the counter blast. So if you have 2 of them, you need 3 counter blasts at that moment. So having cards like Angelica prior, and maybe instead of having 2 Vivinis, you have 1 Vivini and then 1 Angelica, so that it will bring out Chamomile instead, and you still get your 6 attacks minimum. So Angelica played a vital role with counter charging, but also multi-attack, especially if you're going first. Definitely keep at 4, and it's also a great target for the Fire Regalis because it can be called from deck, and you can still get some value out of it during the battle phase. 1 copy of Fire Regalis, so speaking of it, this card was very useful. Essentially, I would soul charge it, I would discard it during the right line, and then I would try to save it for like turn 5, turn 4. What I noticed with Minerva, since we don't generate a big hand, we're sometimes like literally using almost all our cards to defend with. So we may not have the combo pieces, especially if we use them in the prior turn. So just having a Fire Regalis still be able to pop off in the drop zone can really make or break our turns, essentially. So that's where I used it the most. Onto the Grade 2s, we have 4 copies of Vivini. So this is our restander. She came in clutch. So you really made Minerva turns happen because you soul charge the Grade 4. You'll have plenty of soul to be able to do it continually, turn after turn. And also just having the extra draw from it too really helps, because sometimes you draw into another combo piece or maybe some value in terms of shield too. So great card overall, definitely recommend 4 copies. So I made some changes to removing Biscotti and make it Biscotti 2 to make room for 2 more extra Camomiles in the main deck. You may be asking why, and the reason is because I found myself when I was soul charging as I rode up, soul charging generics, and that was really painful in a way. You're not getting value for those cards if they're being soul charged. In fact, you'd rather see those drawn into your hand. So I felt like, what's a better target to soul charge? And it's really your attack extender still with the Chamomile. And the other thing is that it is a Genesis card, so help with consistency if you do need a Genesis card with the Grade 4 Minerva effect, so helps with that too. But I realized too, you can actually get to 7-8 attacks pretty easily if you had the extra Chamomile too on top of that. So I felt like just having the extra copies just made that easier. And it's also helpful in the early game. If you play Minerva, you realize that the early game, if you don't know how to play or approach it, it's not that great. And so this can be a body that you can call, and then it's already 10k. So it can hit grade 2 Vanguards or rear guards as well. And so you can at least commit this, and if it goes to the drop zone, then you could just soul charge it with Vivini later on anyway. So this was something that I appreciated the change actually, so it worked out in my favor. This came up a couple times, just having Camomiles. And also as you face decks like Vyrgilla, they'll start binding your stuff. So it hurts when they bind one of your Camomiles and that's like the only one you have available. Because at that point, now you are forced to rely on having 2 Vivini. And sometimes like even against like Boss Varga, they're retiring your front row. So you need pieces to be easily accessible even from your soul at that point too. As I mentioned with Biscotti, I reduced her to 2. So it's really more of a filler card at this point. We're waiting for that promo that's actually just announced that it's coming out sometime next year for the English. So I'm excited for that, but that's going to be for a while. So this is really for draw power. Now that I added the grade 3 Minerva, I technically can Persona Ride, so that Persona Ride skill can come up. It came up in testing once or twice. It was nice, it's helpful, but it's not like a deal breaker essentially. So it's really just draw power, and I feel like once we get that promo, this is the card I'm taking out and putting 2 copies of that promo, and the deck should feel much more fluid and having access to just being able to call from the top 5 and further decked in as well. So I would just take out Biscotti essentially. Also, quick sponsorship note, check out 50 Card Shop for pre-orders for the next sets coming out for Vanguard. Use the code Jaime to save you a little bit of money too. And then check out Dueling Guard's products too. They have a lot of phenomenal pre-orders for increasing your anime swag. And then recently my affiliate code has reached to 15% discount off, so that way you can save massively on your next purchase too. Click on the affiliate link below as well. Onto the grade 1s, 4 copies of Aurelium. So this is a good card to get the grade 3 Minerva, as I mentioned. This helps soul charge the card that it boosts, so you can reuse Camomiles during your battle phase too to extend again another attack if you have the extra CB and the resources to do so, like soul blasting during the battle phase too. So this card is phenomenal. This is a card that help in the early game too if you get too much damage, so you could just use that excess damage and start like hauling a field effectively. Overall, it's a great card. Now, one of the MVPs is Coco. So 4 copies for sure. So this card, I'm surprised is not a Genesis card. Literally, you shove a card from hand into soul, you check the top 2, and then you can add one from hand, and then you can optionally soul charge the other one or leave it on top. So essentially stacking your deck on top, right? This effect is so good. You can soul charge 1 to 2 cards essentially, and if you see crits front over triggers, you can stack them and you know what's coming. It's a very good feeling, especially with the restaining Vanguard aspect too. So if you know there's a crit already coming, then you're like, oh boy, this Vanguard swing is going to be deadly just in general. And in most of my games, it literally, I saw a crit front or an OT. I think I saw the OT twice as well. One as early as turn 1. So like this is a card that you can call turn 1 to have some early pressure. And what I really love about this is that if you see your front trigger, this is guaranteed 2 attacks to push in. You can even maybe call a third rigger if you're feeling pretty confident about that too, and can afford to, you know, lose those regards because more than likely next turn they'll probably get rid of them, right? But when you get a front trigger, your opponent has to take damage or they have to guard more than they anticipated, and it's turn 1, baby. So like it can hurt because they may not have guard value and they're discarding combo pieces too. This is what gives Minerva early game, just in general as well. The other effect is nice because then you can give triggers to the other column. So if they do damage stack a trigger, this will get the 10k continuously. So now it like basically nullifies that attack when it boosts that actual other column, right? 4 copies of Dissection Angel. So this card is really good because it's Soul Blast. For countercharging, when you see a trigger, this will help you extend more attacks during the battle phase, especially if your opponent doesn't know it's coming. But you know it's coming because you stacked the trigger. Again, it's once per turn, so if you already used it, then you used it. But then the other skill, when at the end of the battle it boosts, it can Soul Blast, retire, and draw a card. That can trigger a Chamomile as well. This card is also good to call down early game. It forces your opponent to take the damage. A 16k Vanguard line is pretty hard to guard without losing too much value. So they 9 times out of 10 just take that attack, and then you guarantee the damage in, and then you'll get a card back anyway. And for the rest of the grade ones, it's just PGs and then the 1 Sanctitude. So I played Sanctitude because it just gets around weird guard restrictions or battle doors type of effects. So I think about like the giant fluffy bear from Heartluru, like it forces 2 cards. This could be something that you can actually just guard from the Blitz order, and that way you could just PG normally instead of like losing 3 cards if you had the PG to begin with. And you never know if you face like a Stride deck or a deck that gets triple drive too. I know even in my testing, Nathaniel was playing Ava, for example, and that gets the actual triple drive ability, and I'm like, that works with the 1 card PG basically. The triggers are pretty straightforward. We got the 4 effect ones. This came up once in the event. Like I literally needed the 3rd soul because the game dragged that long too, and then that was able to be a restand essentially. Then we got 4 more crits, so total 8. I got one of the nice ones, and then 1 blue OT. So it's the 9th crit, and this is really good to put on your Vanguard in most cases too. You'll get a lot of value from it, and then you'll be getting cards back from your drop zone, which can be like PGs or maybe combo pieces, personal ride too, that actually matters. The kettle one just isn't as helpful. You could try using the red OT just to get another attack that way. That's also viable too, so it just depends. Do you value the crit basically? And if you know if you stack this card or a prior crit, your Vanguard's already going to be guaranteed crit 2. And if this is the 3rd crit, then now your Vanguard's guaranteed crit 3. So those are the things that I value, especially if you damage the knight a little bit too during the mid game. Your opponent may be at 3 to 4 damage, and that can be a sweet spot to at least close the game if an attack does hit. We got 3 front triggers. I got the effect once you value the shield value, then the fronts that go into Soul. And the heals, 3 normal heals, and then the one that is for restanders essentially. So this came out once or twice, so it was useful. I've considered going the 2-2 split too, especially with so many restanders in this game. I felt like this was fine because with Minerva, I really wanted to stay low damage. If I could avoid it, don't get to damage 3 unless you really want to use it up on your turn 3. So generally 1 to 2 damage was the sweet spot. And so if that meant that, then I had to guard early. And so I valued the 15k vanilla triggers essentially to guard with. So that's why I still stuck with the 3-1 split. I'll quickly cover some highlights with my round. Round 1 was already meta. It was buff Sarga. Very solid kill turn that I had, and I was able to already start stacking crits on top of the deck for the Minerva swing. So I got that one. Round 2 was Heartluru, which was I was expecting. With decks such as like Heartluru and Vyrgilla, you want to stay at very low damage, apply some early game because it takes a little bit for them to ramp up. Same thing with Varga, doesn't do well with early game too. So that can kind of give you some momentum to push through and be able to outlast them. And then once they're at high damage, it's really hard for them to just take or guard against restanding Minervas, essentially. So that's the game plan for those type of decks. But in this case too, this player was able to call four of the bunnies and actually got the searches and stuff like that. And I'm just like, that's a lot of deck tuning. But after that, they didn't have much to guard with. And so I did my typical Minerva attempt. They went first too, so I was full on grade 4 turn. And again, I was able to stack a crit, but this was even more nutty. My 2nd or 3rd check was a 2nd crit. So now my Vanguard was crit 3. And since they didn't really have any guard value to begin with, they went from 2 to 6 basically in 1 turn. The next round was Vyrgilla. Look at this. Oh, everybody in the metagame, right? And this one was a doozy for me. So I would say that I did a misplay where I couldn't set up grade 4 Minerva. That was already the scenario, the circumstance, but the misplay came when I dedicated to the grade 3 Minerva turn. And essentially I was like, oh, I'll just restand with my grade 3 Minerva. That's the best thing I could do right now. And by the time I swung and realized at the end of the battle that I didn't have a Genesis card to discard, I was just like, well, I'm not restanding. And I already swung with like Vivini and something else, you know, so it's just like that's my turn. What was funny is that he took the damage and he damage tech an OT anyway, and I'm just like, whoa, I guess it wasn't gonna work out in my favor anyway at that point. But that was a really, dumb moment that happened, and I'm like, well, I'm probably gonna lose this one. Not trying to be pessimistic, but it's gonna be hard to take surviving, then come back and all that kind of thing, right? So that's what ended up happening. I lost that round, which is okay. It is what it is. But now, moving forward, Genesis card in hand. My round 4 was interesting. It was against Mygo, and I haven't played Mygo in so long. I was asking the player if they can enlighten me throughout the turns too, but I catched on pretty quickly. it got to the point where essentially I had to decide if I wanted to damage deny him in the mid game. He needed a counterblast to get the order to be able to restand essentially. And I was just like, well, I need to survive one more turn, so I'm going to do that. And I counterblast deny him. He only did 3 attacks, which was helpful. But the problem was that I didn't have anything on the clapback. Like I didn't have a restander. I didn't have like I had the resources, the CB and the soul. But like, man, this sucks. I'm only literally doing like 3 attacks on the clapback. I'm like, I ain't closing this. And it was rough. And so I lost that one. But other than that, very good game. So right now I'm 2-2 already at this point. So I ended up facing Varga for round 5. And Varga, I do remember how to play against it. So that was pretty straightforward. Good guy. He knew what he was doing too. But what really hurts him was his drive checks. I think he drove check like grade 3s or like 5Ks, like so no triggers whatsoever. So Varga is only as strong as the triggers that it gets to, especially from the first swing. And from that, I was able to come back on the clapback, and then even to the point where like he asked me like, how many attacks are you gonna get? I'm like, well, with this setup, I'm gonna get 7 attacks. He's like, yeah, I'm just gonna take the damage at this point. So that's how it happened. So now with 3-2, going into round 6 with Vyrgilla again. She and I had a good back and forth, but also just kind of like the Varga player. What really hurt her was her drive check. She, I think, drove grade 3s as well. So it really hurt that turn to be able to be aggressive. And then I just came back on the clapback and I had a full Minerva turn on top of that. And I think I stacked a front trigger on top of that. So it was just like, they can't guard everything essentially. And so that's how that one ended. So I'm X2 going into round 7. I'm like, okay, let's keep trying. You never know if you bubble in. So let's keep trying. And I also had a good tiebreaker with one of the person, I think they were XO going into round 7 too. So there was a chance, you know. Round 7 is Vyrgilla, like what you expect, right? Vyrgilla everywhere for real. People saw Heartluru and Vyrgilla everywhere, but for me, it was just Vyrgilla everywhere, you know. We had a great back and forth. However, by the time it got to his turn, I had no real shield value, and I was at damage 3 already, which is already dangerous too. And he just did his normal turn, what Vyrgilla does best, essentially. And they did the order where they give the crit to the grade 2, so that grade 2 is already swinging big with crit. I had no PGs, and I think I only had 1 trigger. So like that's it. Everything else was a grade 3 or 5k shield. I am eating all of this basically, and that is rough. And I literally went from 3 damage to 6 damage just like that. We both talked about it after that, like, yeah, we did everything that we could. Like it was just having the shield value or not at that point. I'm like, yeah. So overall, things didn't go exactly as planned. I was hoping to squeeze into the top cut. I was close at first going into round 7 with X2, but it is challenging going against Vyrgilla, Heartluru, and so on. Those decks are very consistent compared to Minerva. Minerva feels like you need pieces to fall into place to actually make your turn happen. And you could only do so much ahead of time to lead up to that turn 3, turn 4. But like those other decks, like Vyrgilla is basically the grade 3 calls the grade 2, and then you do the rewrite skill, and that searches for 2 cards. And you're really basically, that's all you need for a Vyrgilla turn. The boosters are really supplemental and things like that, right? Heartluru calls from the soul like their pale moon, almost like Grand Blue like. And as they're going up the right line, they're setting up their soul. They have the toys for order 2 that also you could rest 2 and then soul charge from the drop zone. And that's a set order. So like you would have to keep seeing another copy of Vivini to be able to soul charge from the drop yourself compared to Heartluru, right? So I feel like Heartluru and Vyrgilla just inherently are more consistent at what they do best. That's going to produce more predictable results. Minerva still has the power to push and top. I do feel strongly about that. I personally enjoy playing Minerva and Genesis overall since it's like my second clan since like 2014 essentially. Minerva was my first competitive deck too since BT14 days, like the original BT14 days. And again, with the new promos coming out, will it help it? It'll be a little more consistent, but I don't know necessarily, maybe, because at the end of the day, those pieces from the top 5 are not guaranteed. I've had moments where you just see all triggers or see dud basically, and I'm like, well, that was a waste of a fire regardless. It is what it is. I did have fun with the deck. Like it was so fun playing Minerva again. It was literally reliving BT14, GBT14 days since it's also great for Minerva, and just being able to stack crits or OTs or fronts was just, you know, it's like that Pacha meme, right? I want to give massive shout outs to my locals for being testing buddies as well. Also, special thanks to Nathaniel again and Lupe. They're phenomenal players. I'm just grateful that they helped me prep as well. And I hope they do better than me on their BCS events coming up too in the future too. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Minerva and also in this current metagame. And if you want to see more standard content, you can check out this next video. Till next time, amigos.